Time someone reminds me it's only been a month. They're moving so quickly, it's just been absolutely stunning. Let's round out some of our top stories with this. President Trump also saying he will likely meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin before the end of the month to discuss an end to the war in Ukraine, telling reporters, quote, Russia wants to do something. Trump adding he was disappointed to hear Ukrainian officials complain about being left out of talks. Andrew Bishop of Signum Global Advisors writing a Putin-Trump meeting will likely not take place next week, as had previously been floated. It is a reminder that the pace of talks will likely continue to be slower than US President Donald Trump has insisted they will. Andrew joins us now for more. Andrew, welcome to the program, sir. I want to pick up on some of the comments that President Trump issued yesterday about Zelensky. It feels like Zelensky's being left out in the cold. The president suggested yesterday that he helped cause this war. But Andrew, how are those two individuals going to work together, if at all?
They're not. And for background, Signum's base case on this war has been that there will be no quick ceasefire, no quick peace deal. But the reason for that is not because we expected Trump to be friendly with Zelensky or supportive of Ukraine. The reason for that is that we think that once President Trump starts realizing that this war is intractable and that neither Zelensky nor Putin really want a short-term peace deal, he will essentially just walk away. I mean, Trump had two goals going into this. One was international recognition, the famous, sort of Nobel Peace Prize aspiration. That's not going to happen, and he's going to realize that very quickly. The other goal he had was to deliver to his voters a promise to get out of the war in Ukraine. And here's the kicker. He can get out of the war in Ukraine without actually forcing Ukraine into a bad deal.
Andrew, what kind of timeline do you see set up for this? Jonathan was just talking about we're a month into this administration. They've been very aggressive. And Trump yesterday talked about he would, quote, probably see Putin by the end of the month, the next week. I think a lot of people think that's not realistic. So what does the timeline look like for potentially a summit and then a ceasefire?
Yeah, so for background, the reason that they've been floating next week was because on February 27th, it was expected that Trump would be in the region, in part related to Gaza and the Arab government plan on reconstruction. And they also wanted to avoid Ramadan or have the meeting be held before Ramadan. Those two goals seem to be out of the window now. Our view at Signum has always been phone call in February, meeting in March, talks start in April. That remains our view. And I think if you follow that timeline, essentially the talks will start sort of running the ground or looking like they're going nowhere by late spring, early summer, at which stage Trump has to make a decision. Force Ukraine into the bad deal that it doesn't want, which we don't think is likely, in part because of his U.S. constituencies, Republican senators being supportive of Ukraine, et cetera. Force Putin to cave through big oil sanctions, which we don't think Trump will take or go down that route because of the risk of high gasoline prices in the U.S., or just walk away. And our base case is he'll just walk away.
When it comes to Zelensky, Putin, and Trump, is there anything on the negotiating table that all three can agree on?
Yes, actually, they can agree on most of the issues. So, I don't want to use Ukraine, the phrase Ukraine would be fine with this because it would be massive concessions and very painful. But essentially, everyone understands that Ukraine is going to, as part of any deal, is going to have to forego the 5 territories it lost, at least de facto, pull out of Kursk, and agree to become neutral, no NATO, etc. The poison pill is only one item, which is security guarantees. And here's where we see no overlap between the Ukrainian position and the Russian position, i.e., the minimal security guarantees that Ukraine would accept are probably still too much for Putin to stomach.
When it comes to this potential mineral deal that the U.S. can strike on a bipartisan basis with Ukraine, we're going to have the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in the studio tomorrow. He went to Kyiv to present it. Zelensky didn't want to sign this deal. Do you think that there is potential for a security agreement via raw minerals between Washington and Kyiv?
I think there is, but only for the continuation of the war, not for the post-war period. So allow me to explain very briefly. I think the reason that the deal wasn't signed as quickly as the U.S. expected is because it had not been clearly defined what this deal was about. Was it about paying back the U.S. for previously delivered weapons? In which case, the U.S. just doesn't have leverage, right? I mean, it's given the money. There's no reason why Zelensky would agree to pay back post hoc. Was it about paying for continued delivery of U.S. weapons, which we think is essentially what it'll end up being? Or is it about sort of making sure that the U.S. has a vested interest in Ukraine's future the way it does Taiwan, and that acts as a security guarantee? And that, I think, is not realistic because these minerals and U.S. companies are not present in these mineral areas. And Ukraine is just not going to take this pie-in-the-sky promise of security guarantees.
Andrew, can we wrap things up by talking about Europe? We're seeing some real divergence between defense stocks in the United States and defense stocks over in Europe. European defense stocks are ripping to start the year, and US defense stocks are selling off. The market is beginning to understand, I think, this idea that maybe the US pulls back on defense spending, possibly, and Europe's going to be able to boost it. Andrew, do you see it playing out that easily?
I don't, for a couple of reasons. One is I think the U.S. will, and therefore U.S. defense companies will continue to support Ukraine. Again, Trump can walk away in the sense of not having to foot the bill, not being in charge of the deliveries, but still allow the Europeans to buy American weapons, which I think he will. And conversely, we do think that the European defense sector is going to keep going up, and defense stocks have support, but probably not as fast as people expect. And this is one of the reasons why we're taking clients today to Poland and Ukraine as part of a Signum delegation to explore these questions.
Andrew, appreciate it. Look forward to getting a recap once that trip is complete. Andrew Bishop there of Signum Global Advisors on the latest. That's where they're thinking.